Gaunter O'Dimm isn't the real villain of Hearts of Stone, although he's certainly evil. He doesn't seem it at first, appearing as a simple merchant, but his sinister presence can be felt in almost every scene of this DLC. Despite being unarmed and rarely raising his voice, every other character, be they warlords, witches, or mages, are cowed by his presence. It's no wonder O'Dimm is so intimidating. His vindictiveness and near omnipotence make him an adversary anyone would want to avoid. O'Dimm profits from human suffering. He grants people their deepest desires, but through wordplay and loopholes turns their existence into a living nightmare. Take poor Professor Shakeslog. Wishing only to be protected from O'Dimm's sorcery, he was granted physical security, but forced to remain within a tiny spell diagram, which, should he ever leave, would result in immediate death. The vast majority of O'Dimm's victims bring their hideous fates upon themselves. Olgierd Von Everec, for instance, traded his own brother's life for fortune and immortality. Little did Olgierd know, O'Dimm would grant him immortality by turning his heart to stone, which made him invulnerable as well as devoid of any feeling, positive or negative. I believe there are two messages at the crux of Hearts of Stone. What O'Dimm offers is a seemingly consequence-free way of achieving one's deepest desires. What is demonstrated is how thin the veil is between thought and action. Olgierd would never stoop to murdering his own brother with his own hands, even if his brother had possessed a fortune. But when O'Dimm offered Olgierd an opportunity to trade his brother's life without bloodying his own hands in exchange for wealth and immortality, he jumped at the chance. Given that such a predisposition existed in Olgierd in the first place, it's clear that O'Dimm far from transforms him into the heartless criminal he later becomes. The seeds of that villainy already existed. This isn't to say that Olgierd, prior to the pact, was wholeheartedly evil. He was in a dire place, impoverished and shunned by the family he wished to marry into. There seemed little hope that he would live up to his own clan's high expectations. The decision to sacrifice Vladimir was not one made in isolation. But if Olgierd thought he could come away from the pact unstained, he was sorely mistaken. Most obviously, he didn't anticipate that O'Dimm would ever harvest his soul, underestimating the demon's ability at wordplay. O'Dimm stipulated that the terms of the pact could only be fulfilled stood on the moon, but he failed to clarify what type of moon. O'Dimm is thus able to reap his due when Olgierd sets foot, at the end of the quest, on a moon mosaic. More importantly, however, Olgierd failed to anticipate that trading his own brother's life for his own benefit would destroy his humanity. Literally, this is facilitated by Olgierd's newfound heart of stone, which ensured the breakdown of his marriage and extenuated his thirst for blood by depriving him of any inkling of empathy. Just to feel alive, Olgierd resorted to random acts of violence. The second key message in Hearts of Stone seems to be that even our deepest desires aren't worth trading our humanity. No matter how impoverished you are, how disgraced you are, how heartbroken you are, your sense of empathy is never worth trading for material gain. Of course, it's unrealistic to suppose that people recognise in these situations that they're making this trade-off. In Olgierd's case, he might well have felt very sorry about sacrificing his brother, but in his thinking, it was justified by the needs of the family. It's only later that Olgierd recognises the gross selfishness of his act. In so plainly trading his brother's life for his own, in placing his own existence above someone else's, he broke the backbone of his own humanity, and at the end of the day, it's our humanity that binds us together, a shared appreciation of the worth of human life. The Heart of Stone is perhaps an allegory for how, when we subvert or attempt to trick our sense of empathy through casuistry, we are in effect sacrificing it. And when we lose such an important part of ourselves, once that irreversible step across the boundary has been made, it's almost impossible to reclaim it again. And a life without empathy, feeling, is a life not worth living at all. And yet, Olgierd has a chance of reclaiming his humanity, if you so allow it. In one of the two endings for Hearts of Stone, you can intervene on Olgierd's behalf and save him, an act that will banish O'Dimm and reverse the remnants of the pact. Olgierd will become mortal again, but regain his ability to empathise. Whether Olgierd deserves this second chance is a moot point. Few would willingly sacrifice another, yet alone a sibling for their own benefit. Olgierd, even prior to acquiring his Heart of Stone, was always a self-centered person. He raided and pillaged as he pleased. Countless died at his sword, and for what? His personal enjoyment, his decision to sacrifice his own brother thus comes as little surprise. And yet, Olgierd only made that pact because of O'Dimm. Many people have dark thoughts and desires, trades they'd be willing to make in theory, and yet they don't, because when it comes to it, they're unwilling to get their hands dirty. So is it unfair to judge Olgierd when, in fact, many people, if they were in the same position, would do exactly the same thing? Nonetheless, I don't believe that Olgierd is really a victim. I think he was predisposed to such a selfish act. The seeds of the depraved man he would later become were already present. And yet, if the message at the heart of this DLC is the need to stay in contact with empathy, isn't it heartless to condemn Olgierd to his fate? Doesn't he deserve a second chance? At the end of the day, your decision will likely rest on who you consider more to blame. Gaunter O'Dimm for facilitating Olgierd's wishes, or Olgierd for his willingness to make the pact in the first place. Who is the true villain?